What is up, guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here. In today's video, I am bringing you guys a full breakdown of every card in Duel Devastator. So the set was finally revealed on Farfa's channel today, showing all of the cards that are going to be included in every single box of Duel Devastator, and honestly, it looks pretty good. Like, I know a lot of players are kind of salty that certain cards weren't included, but really that's not too surprising. I don't think that anyone was realistically expecting cards like Infinite Impermanence or Phantasme or Pot of Extravagance to be in the set, especially when everything is guaranteed, right? There's no chance. It's kind of like a structure deck. You know what you're getting when you buy a box of this product. What we do have in this set, though, are a lot of really good generic cards that every single player should have access to. Chances are that if you've been playing Yu-Gi-Oh for a relatively long time, you already have a lot of these cards, so maybe you're not after everything in this set. However, for those of you who are just getting into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh, or were looking to avoid spending money on certain cards because they were too expensive before, I think this set is perfect for you guys. There's a lot of cards in here that are really useful and provide really good value. So yeah, one thing I just want you guys to know, I'm not going to be going too in-depth with any of the cards here because most of them are reprints. We're just going to quickly gloss over the card and then briefly discuss its implications on the competitive meta or the secondary market. So yeah, let's jump right into it. Alright, so first up, let's go over the two cards that are being newly imported to the TCG. So first up, we have Red Blossoms from Underroot, formerly known as Blood Blossom of the Afterlife. So this card effect states that if this card is in your hand, you can banish one spell or trap card from each graveyard to special summon this card, and then you contribute it, target a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link monster in either graveyard, banish that card, and then if you do, you can special summon one monster from your graveyard, a Fusion, Synchro, Xyz, or Link that is different from that target, and you can only use each effect of Red Blossoms from Underroot once per turn. So honestly, I don't really see this card having much of a big impact on the meta here. It hasn't seen any play really in the OCG, and its effect is pretty situational, right? Like, in order to get the maximum value from it, you have to special summon it. But if your opponent has a spell or trap card in the graveyard, unless it's something like Infinite Impermanence or Typhoon, you're probably not going to be able to summon it out for free. Also, its revival effect is really specific, right? You have to banish some other thing in order to get the monster that you want, and the monster that you want has to already be in your graveyard. So this is kind of a really situational, difficult requirement to meet, and I don't really see this card having very much competitive influence at all, at least at the moment. I mean, maybe there's something that'll be able to abuse it in the future. I do think that the biggest selling point of this card is the fact that it's like a waifu card, right? It's like a cute anime kind of girl thing. So I think that players who collect all of the other Ghost Girl hand traps or like collecting those female type cards are going to want to add this card to their collections too. So I do expect it to be worth at least a couple dollars over the next coming months as these cards slowly disappear from the market. So the other import that we have here is Decode Talker Extended. So this card is really similar to Decode Talker. It has the same stats, the same arrows, same summoning requirements, same attack boosting effect, and it is also a Link 3, but rather than saving a monster, its effect is more offensive in that if something that it points to is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can have it make a second attack that turn. Honestly, I feel like you would never want to just end on this card. Its effect is pretty underwhelming. The protection is what made Decode Talker good in the first place. If you're summoning this, I feel like you're better off just not making this and going into Boral Sword Dragon a different way if you want to get that double attack off and go for game. So yeah, nothing really to see here. Okay, so next we have one of the main draws to this set. We have all of the Ghost Girl hand traps being reprinted here, which is huge, right? These cards were previously kind of a pain to get, especially something like Ash Blossom, where you were looking at $8 to $10 for a common copy of the card. But also Ogre and Ghost Bell were starting to get up there in terms of price as well. So these reprints really do make them accessible to absolutely everyone. So if you were putting off buying them before because of their price or because they were hard to find, you have no excuses now, right? Everyone should have access to these hand traps. They're such a staple part of the way the game is played now. Even a lot of players who already have them, though, are still going to want them because these cards have alternate artworks, which I think are really nice. Because of how exclusive these card arts are, I would definitely expect all of these cards to climb up in price a bit gradually over time. Remember, you have to spend $30 to $40 to get a box of this product. So a lot of people are going to just be buying singles that they want. However, that means that the available quantity of these is going to go down over time. So at that point, right, I think that people would rather spend $5 on a single copy of an alternate art card than $35 or $40 for like the entire box. So that's going to kind of like drive some of these odd card prices up over time. Also, I do need you guys to settle something for me. Some friends and I were arguing over which alternate art is nicer. They're saying that they like Ghost Ogre, but honestly, I like don't see it at all. I personally think that Ghost Belle is the nicest. So do me a favor, comment down below which one you guys like the best so that you guys can settle this for us. So there are a few other hand traps here being reprinted. These are some hand traps that are pretty staple in the meta at the moment. So I do think that it's really great that all of these cards are here. And these are just great cards to have in general. Effect Veiler is really important, even with Impermanence being a card. The ability to disrupt your opponent and negate their monster's effect when they're going first is really big. Like so much so that some people are even playing Veiler alongside Impermanence in the main deck. Lancia is essentially like a staple side deck card now because of Orcus. It like shuts down that deck for an entire turn. DD Crow is something else that has seen a fair bit of side deck play recently. It hits really key cards in certain decks, right? Like you can hit Dingirsu in Orcus, you can hit Ray in Sky Strikers, or you can hit Spinny in Salamangreat. Now these reprints do feel a little bit unnecessary, as each of these cards has been reprinted multiple times over the course of the game. However, I do think that they're still great cards to hold onto because they're definitely going to find ways to be relevant in the meta again. They also give players an opportunity to bling out their decks, right? Since all three of these cards were previously most accessible as commons. Okay, so for Floodgate Monsters, we have 5 of them included here. So Spell Canceller we saw coming, right? It was a great inclusion. It always pops up now and again when a spell heavy deck comes up. Like before, it was being played in Necroz format because of how dependent that deck is on spells in order to like play the game. Denko Sekka is really useful because it freezes your opponent's back row, which is good against those heavy back row decks when you aren't really dependent on back row yourself. Majesty's Fiend is kind of interesting, right? Like Majesty's Fiend hasn't seen too much play recently, and I think that's mostly because of how easy it is to out with Pankratops, right? Majesty's Fiend doesn't stop you from summoning Pankratops, and then you can just like beat over it. So it's not that great, but Majesty's Fiend, it negates all monster effects that activate, so I think it is like really good, and it will be good at some point in the future. Vanity's Fiend is just like a very good generic tribute summon Floodgate, like anything that can special summon a monster for free and then tribute that card for Vanity's Fiend has the ability to like win the game outright, right? Because the game is so dependent on being able to special summon multiple times in order to build your own board or break your opponent's board that Vanity's Fiend can just like end the game single-handedly. And then finally, Inspector Border is something that has just gradually been climbing up in price over the last little while, right? It only had that Mega Tin reprint, so the card being reprinted is going to be pretty cool, and it just helps to drive the price down a little bit more. And there are a few other side deck monsters included here. So Pankratops is like a really popular card. It sees lots of play in both the main deck and side deck, both here and in the OCG. However, this is like the 3rd holo reprint of this card we've gotten in the last couple of months, so I feel like everyone's kind of sick of it now. Like, I feel like it's like the new Foolish Burial Goods, you know what I mean? The fact that it's reprinted in the exact same rarity as the Megatins also kind of takes away from its value here. Gameciel's a pretty interesting card. I didn't think it would be included here because technically it's like a kaiju card, it's not generic. But it is the best kaiju to have access to. It's the kaiju with the lowest attack points so that it's the easiest to run over. And it's great for outing like that one single monster on your opponent's board. So if you're playing against Sky Striker, you can put it over their monster, and they have a monster in the main monster zone now, so it's really good there, right? Because they don't summon like multiple monsters to the board at a time. Or if you have like that one really important negate that you really need to get rid of in order to break a combo deck's board, Gameciel would be really useful there as well. Gate Blocker is the last one, which feels really random, right? Like, who talks about this card? But we actually saw this card hyped up for a little bit as people were talking about using it as an answer to Mystic Mine, which I guess is pretty funny. It's not like really practical, and we've seen the hype die down now, but it stops the secret rare price from really getting out of hand. Okay, so there aren't too many spell cards other than what we were really kind of like expecting. All 4 of the cards that you guys see here are extremely meta relevant, and while they would be considered side deck cards, I guess, like a lot of them have found their way into the main deck as decks have found ways to adapt their strategies and go second in order to take advantage of certain really powerful cards, right? Mind Control and Super Poly are really good examples of these, as they help to break down your opponent's field and allow you to OTK, getting rid of potentially problematic floodgates or negates in the process. Super Poly is something that was really needed, right? Because we were looking at over $10 for the common copies alone, which is absolutely ridiculous. Also, Mind Control hasn't been reprinted in a while, right? Like, it had a common structure deck printing, but its most recent reprint was either in Gold Series or Legendary Collection Yugi's World, which right now is still several years ago. Called by the Grave is of course a necessary card to deal with hand traps, and given how important hand traps are in the game now, it's something that a lot of people are going to want to play and everyone should have access to. I mean, like, it's probably even going to be more important now that everyone has access to the hand traps in Duel Devastator, right? Finally, Cosmic Cyclone was reprinted here. It's something that a lot of people are turning to as a main deck option over MST, because it helps to deal with problems like Orcus Crescendo, right? Because MST can't kill Crescendo through Dingirsu. It also helps to banish certain problematic cards like Multi-Roll. So Book of Eclipse is something that used to be really good. It was like an out to the Jinlock back in Necros format, but Link Monsters can't be turned to defense mode, so it really hasn't seen any play at all recently. Silent Graveyard is mostly just filler, hasn't really seen any meta play ever, but it hasn't come holo before, so that's kind of cool, I guess. Wave Motion Cannon is the last spell card, and it really just like needed any sort of reprint, right? It hasn't been reprinted in a really long time, but it is a good card in burn strategies like with Mystic Mine, and it can be used to win games in time. Not something I'd really be dependent on in order to win me the game, but it's like a welcome reprint nevertheless. Okay, so on to trap cards. There's quite a few of them here as we predicted. So both Typhoon and Heavy Storm Duster were reprinted. Typhoon is great because it's another trap that can be activated from your hand when your opponent is going first, although it is a little bit more situational than something like Infinite Impermanence. However, it hasn't been reprinted for quite a while, so the reprint is pretty welcome here. Heavy Storm Duster is like an alternative to Twin Twisters, but whereas you don't have to discard a card as cost, it is a trap card, so it's a bit slower. Lost Wind and Different Dimension Ground were both included in here, but I feel like these cards aren't ever going to be relevant again ever, unless we find like a really specific need for those cards. They're pretty much completely outclassed by Infinite Impermanence and Dimension Shifter for what they do, which have very similar effects, but can be activated from the hand. Also, Forbidden Apocrypha and Dimensional Barrier are in here. Does anyone else remember when Dimensional Barrier was like a $70 to $80 card? I remember opening boxes of Invasion Vengeance, and we were opening Totally Awesome and Dimensional Barrier left and right. That was like really fun. But yeah, no one even thinks twice about a card like Dimensional Barrier right now. Okay, so for other trap cards, we have a few Floodgates here. There Can Be Only One was probably the easiest to see coming and was very necessary, right? It was getting really up there in terms of price, and it has been seeing a fair bit of meta play because it answers decks like Thunder Dragon or Orcust. I don't know how necessarily good the card is going to be going forward, especially considering that we have a ban list coming up, but that's okay. This stops the price from skyrocketing anywhere too crazy. The other two Floodgate cards here are Royal Decree and Anti-Spell Fragrance. Royal Decree is like whatever, it hasn't really been too relevant in terms of price or in terms of play ever since we've gotten that reprint in the Secret Forces. Besides that, all the traps that people play are like hand traps, right? So it doesn't really do anything there, and Royal Decree is a bit too slow. Anti-Spell Fragrance is cool because it's one of those cards that always seems to just shoot up in price randomly because it slows down or stops some really specific strategy, kind of like Spell Canceller, right? Because it's hating on those spell cards. Both Spell Fragrance and Royal Decree will probably find their way back into the format somehow at some point, even if it takes like quite a while for that to happen. And finally, we have a few counter traps here as well. So Solemn Strike is really big. It's been reprinted a couple of times, but it was still relatively pricey. It's just a really strong card and wasn't necessarily the easiest card to have access to, but I think that the fact that it's reprinted here is great for players in general. Red Reboot was just reprinted in the Megatins as a Prismatic Secret Rare, and I think that version looks really nice. So I think its inclusion here was kind of unnecessary. However, it's still a very good card in those decks that want to go second and just freeze your opponent's back row so that you can OTK them. Wiretap here I think is mostly just filler. I haven't actually thought about this card in a while. I remember it used to be good back during like hat format. I guess it could be useful in that you can shuffle back Artifact Sanctum or Orcus Crescendo, but honestly it just feels way too slow and underwhelming for the current format. Okay, so finally, let's go through the extra deck monsters. Honestly, there's really not too much to see here, right? I think that most of the value from Duel Devastator actually comes from the side deck cards and not too much from the extra deck cards. So synchros aren't really relevant to the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now. There are very few that actually see meta play, so like Dawn Dragster or Borreload Savage Dragon or Psyframe Lord Omega. Honestly, the cards that are included here, which you guys can see on the screen, I don't think have really seen much play at all recently, so I'm kind of confused about why they were included in here. I mean, Trishula is always going to be at least somewhat relevant, and don't get me wrong, like most of these cards are really good or useful in just the right circumstances. Like Scarlet Red Dragon Archfiend you can still summon off of Egger Pain, right, and it can be useful to win you the game in time. Black Rose Dragon can still win you the game by blowing up the entire board and then allowing you to OTK your opponent. Or Stardust Spark Dragon like lets you protect a certain card, right? All of these cards have their own very specific uses. I just feel like there aren't really any decks at the moment that have the extra deck space to accommodate all of these toolbox synchro monsters. That being said, I do think it would be a good idea to hold on to your copies of all of these synchros just in case like we approach a format where synchros are the big main summoning mechanic for a new archetype. So next, onto the Xyz monsters. I'm actually really surprised that all of the Xyz monsters included here are rank 4s. I mean, admittedly, we don't really make too much else, especially in the current meta, aside from like the occasional True King of All Calamities or Dante or something like that. However, the rank 4 toolbox is the best, so it does kind of make sense in that regard. Now, all of these cards were really meta relevant and game breaking at one point in each of their respective times, and they each kind of like answer a specific scenario, right? Dweller helps to stop those really prominent graveyard effects, Tornado Dragon helps to kill back row, and then 101 and Castell each get rid of problem cards that are on the field. Admittedly, of all of them, like the only one to currently see any meta play at all really is Abyss Dweller, which I think is still a good card. However, I think it's only a matter of time before some deck has the ability to like make a board and then end also on a rank 4, or to put up a rank 4 in order to get rid of a problem card. So one of these cards is probably going to be put there. So yeah, I think rank 4s are definitely something that a lot of decks seem to have access to. So these are really good choices for cards to have access to at all times. And finally, we are on to the Link monsters. Honestly, I feel like the Link 2 and Link 3 monsters included here are really underwhelming, right? Like they're mostly outclassed by current meta monsters. So for example, Land for Hinkus is completely outdone by something like Beat Cop or Lambda, except for like those really rare circumstances where you're under there can be only one, or Goes in Match or Rivalry or something like that. I guess Underclock Taker could still be useful for its attack point boosting, but it's pretty underused at the moment. And then for Link 3s, right, like I think either Nightmare Unicorn or Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos are 100 times better than something like Decode Talker or Gaia Saber. However, I do think that the Link 4s included here are really good. Saryuja was a very necessary reprint, right? I think it's the card that most people were most excited about coming from this set. It has honestly been abused so many times and in so many different decks that it's kind of ridiculous. However, I do think that it will finally get limited on the upcoming ban list, so you can expect that to tank the price of the card even further, because right now a lot of people are playing 2 to 3 copies of this card and abusing it to dig through their decks. And finally, we have Topologic Bomber Dragon, which was another really good reprint, right? It was needed in certain Orcus decks, right? And they used the Orcus quick effects with the field spell to trigger the effect of Bomber Dragon. And if Orcus actually gets hit on the upcoming ban list as well, that might be a way that the deck needs to adapt in order to play in the future. And with Striker Dragon being introduced to the TCG in Chaos Impact next month, Bomber Dragon has the chance to see even more meta play. Alright guys, that is it for this video. I tried not to make it too long since most of the cards in here are reprints and we didn't really need too much of an explanation for every single card in the set. Honestly, I think that this set is absolutely amazing for new players. If you were expecting like those really high dollar cards to be in here like Phantasme or Infinite Impermanence, then maybe you were a bit disappointed, but really for those players who are just starting to build up their collection or pools of cards, this set is amazing and is definitely sort of like a gateway to competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! For players that were maybe a bit hesitant to go out and buy a bunch of cards, right? Like this one product gives access to so many different things. But yeah, that is it for this video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed it. I'm personally really excited for this set to drop, mostly because I'm going to be looking at picking up a bunch of copies of each of the different hand traps. I feel like those are going to make really solid investments. So yeah, be sure to slam that thumbs up button, guys, if you liked the video, and of course make sure you hit that subscribe button to see all of the latest content from MST.TV. Over the next week or so, I'm hoping to have another market watch posted, as well as discuss some of my investment ideas for the upcoming format, because Tombox is away at YCS Niagara this weekend. Also, of course, guys, make sure that you guys comment below. Let me know which alternate hand trap artwork is your favorite so you can settle me and my friends' debate once and for all. And of course, let me know what you guys' thoughts are on Duel Devastator. So yeah, until next time, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.